There are routes in the mountains that no longer need introduction. Their names are printed in guidebooks, repeated in documentaries, sold in summit dreams, and spoken with the calm confidence of places that have already been understood. That is part of what makes them so dangerous. The threat is not always mystery. Sometimes it is familiarity. A climber clips in beneath a wall of ice on K2. Another moves fast across a rockfall gully on Mont Blanc. On the Matterhorn, boots scrape over polished stone high above the valley. These are not random accidents in random places. They happen on famous lines that have been climbed for decades. Routes with huts, schedules, forecasts, fixed ropes, and traffic. Routes that look, from a distance, like systems people have learned to manage. But a mountain route is not a road. It is not stable just because it has a name. It is not safer because many people stood there last season. It is a temporary negotiation with terrain, weather, exposure, altitude, and time. And on some routes, the climb upward is only the first half of the gamble. The real test begins when tired bodies have to come back through the same danger with less strength, less focus, and fewer choices. On Mont Blanc, that lesson begins in a place so short it can look almost trivial on a map. The Aiguille de Goûter Route is the standard ascent used by many climbers aiming for the summit of Western Europe's highest peak. It passes huts, glaciers, and a rocky rise toward the Aiguille. But before the route settles into the upper mountain, it forces climbers across the Grand Couloir, a steep gully that channels loose stone and falling rock. This is not drama added by storytelling, it is a physical choke point. Anyone crossing it is exposed to the same slope above, the same gravity, the same clock. In photographs, the crossing can seem deceptively small. In reality, it is a place where people hurry because staying still feels worse. The route teaches a brutal rule of objective hazard. Skill matters, timing matters, judgment matters, but none of them can negotiate with a rock that is already falling. The couloir has built its reputation not through one famous catastrophe, but through repetition. Summer after summer, climbers arrive believing the real climb starts later. Then this short section reminds them that a route can be deadly long before it becomes technically grand. What makes Mont Blanc important in this story is not just the body count, it is the illusion of normality. This is the normal route, the standard line, the one chosen precisely because it is supposed to be the accessible answer. Yet that label hides the fact that one of the mountain's greatest threats is packed into a narrow passage where exposure is concentrated, rock is unstable, and delay can become danger. The route is not extreme in one dramatic burst. It is dangerous in a way that feels almost administrative, as though the mountain has hidden a fatal condition inside the paperwork. Then, the shape changes. The Matterhorn rises above Zermatt and Breuil-Sevigny like a mountain drawn from memory rather than geology. Few peaks on Earth look more iconic. It has become image, symbol, logo, and ambition. That familiarity is part of its power and part of its deception. The Hornley Ridge, the most commonly used route to the summit, does not invite climbers onto a smooth pyramid. It leads them onto a long, exposed structure of broken rock, fixed ropes, steep steps, polished holes, and relentless consequence for small errors.
The Matterhorn punishes people in ways that are easy to understand and therefore easy to dismiss. Falls, rockfall, fatigue, route-finding mistakes, crowding. A summit day that begins in darkness and can turn into pressure as slower teams stack up above and below one another. There is nothing supernatural here, nothing hidden. The danger is visible. But visible danger does not always produce careful behavior. Sometimes it produces overconfidence. People see the route, they see other climbers, they see a famous peak that has been climbed thousands of times. What they do not always feel until too late is how little margin the ridge gives back. On the Hornley, efficiency is not style, it is survival. A missed foothold is not an embarrassment, it can be the end of the climb. Loose stone knocked by one party becomes a threat to another. A late summit turns descent into a different mountain. The route strips away the comforting idea that famous means controlled. On the Matterhorn, fame increases traffic, and traffic can amplify stress. The mountain remains exactly what it always was: steep, exposed, and indifferent. Then the scale shifts again, from the Alps to the Himalaya, from exposed rock to a mountain that has long stood inside one of high-altitude climbing's darkest statistical histories. Annapurna 1 is not the highest 8,000-meter peak, and it is not the most publicly mythologized, but for decades it held a fearsome reputation because the ratio between summits and deaths remained appallingly high. Even as equipment, forecasting, guiding, and route preparation improved, Annapurna never became casual. It simply became a little less impossible. The route itself is only part of the problem. Annapurna's deeper danger is where that route exists. Climbers move through terrain threatened by avalanches from above, and avalanches are different from the hazards that dominate on some other peaks. Fatigue can be managed, pace can be adjusted, turnaround times can be set. Avalanche terrain is harsher. It can kill skilled climbers who made many correct decisions. It can erase progress in seconds. It can turn route preparation itself into one of the deadliest jobs on the mountain. That is what makes Annapurna so disturbing. The mountain does not merely ask whether a climber is strong enough, it asks whether the slope above will hold. A person can acclimatize well, climb efficiently, and still be standing in the wrong place at the wrong second. The line upward passes through zones where the real threat is not just altitude, but exposure to moving snow and ice with almost no meaningful defense once it releases. On a mountain like this, courage is not the same as control. And then there is K2. K2 is often introduced through its reputation, but reputation can make a mountain sound abstract, almost theatrical. The reality is more precise. On the standard Abruzzi spur, climbers are funneled higher and higher into a route that keeps narrowing their options. They pass steep snow and ice, fixed lines, hanging exposure, and the long pressure of climbing in the death zone. Then comes the bottleneck, a couloir high on the mountain beneath overhanging seracs. It is one of the clearest examples in mountaineering of a known danger that cannot simply be engineered away by courage. Everyone understands the problem. Spend too long there and the risk grows. Move too slowly and the descent becomes later, colder, and more fragile. Move too fast and the route punishes haste. By the time climbers reach this section, they are already operating near the limits of judgment, strength, and oxygen. That is why the route has produced such a severe history. The danger is not only the steepness, it is the sequence. K2 forces critical decisions high, late, and under a collapsing margin. In 2008, that structure failed in the worst possible way. After delays on the ascent, climbers reached the summit late. Then, during the descent, ice fell in the bottleneck area and took out fixed lines. Above 8,000 meters, in darkness, exhaustion, and confusion, the route stopped functioning as planned. What followed was not one simple accident, but a chain reaction. Falls, stranding, separation, exposure. 11 people died over the course of the disaster. The event remains the worst single accident in K2 mountaineering history. What happened on K2 matters because it strips the romance out of the idea of a classic route. This was not a mystery place off the map. It was a known line on one of the world's most studied mountains. Climbers understood the bottleneck, they feared it, they prepared for it, and still, once the descent broke apart, the route showed its true nature. High enough to weaken almost everyone, narrow enough to concentrate everyone, committed enough that retreat was no longer a simple choice. That is the common thread running through all of these mountains: Mont Blanc, the Matterhorn, Annapurna, K2. Different scales, different climates, different styles of climbing, but the same underlying trap. A named route creates the impression of a solved problem. It suggests a line that has been tested and therefore tamed. In reality, a route is only a temporary passage through unstable conditions. The mountain does not remember that the line is famous. It does not care that the weather window looked good at dawn. It does not care that the summit was reached.
And that may be the hardest truth in mountaineering to accept. Getting up can feel like the goal, the climax, the proof that the plan worked. But on many of the world's most dangerous routes, the summit is only the halfway point, where tired optimism begins to collide with physics. Gravity is the same, oxygen is lower, attention is weaker, crowds are slower, temperatures fall, snow softens or hardens, rock continues to move, fixed lines can fail. A route that seemed achievable on the way up can become lethal on the way down. These are routes of no return, not because nobody comes back from them. Many do. They are routes of no return because every ascent enters a place where return is never guaranteed, where the mountain keeps the right to change the terms after the commitment has already been made. That is why these lines continue to command fear, not because they are unknown, but because they are known too well. The map is clear, the danger is visible, and still, in the thin space between confidence and consequence, people keep learning the same lesson, too late.